Welcome to All In, a straight shooting, science-based podcast about periods, fertility, and nurturing health outside of unrealistic beauty expectations. We will mostly, but not exclusively, focus on hypothalamic amenorrhea, HA, a component of the female athlete triad, and relative energy deficiency in sport.
I'm Dr. Nicola Rinaldi, scientist and lead author of the book No Period, Now What? I specialize in helping people understand how their eating, exercise, and lifestyle habits are keeping them from hormonal health and their best life. My work focuses on regaining periods, improving fertility, and breaking free of the rules of underlying diet culture.
My name is Florence Gillet. I'm a certified eating psychology coach and the founder of BeyondBodyImage.com. I specialize in mental recovery, helping people let go of toxic health beliefs to finally feel at ease in their bodies at any size.
Every 2 weeks, the All In podcast brings you real recovery stories, expert insights, and new scientific research on HA, hormonal health, and fertility, with an unmissable touch of body respect and women's empowerment.
Just a reminder that this podcast represents the opinions of the hosts and their guests. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. It is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Music by the Andy Shulman Band, available on Spotify.
So today we have with us Cynthia Donovan, who is a registered dietitian. She's been that for about 10 years and has changed over the last few years to become, a non-diet dietitian starting about 5 years ago, and then moving into the space of HA and period recovery over about the last 2 years. So Cynthia, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Honestly, I think the story that I'm about to tell is going to speak for itself. But yes, really, I came to become a dietitian that really focuses on helping women recover their periods through food and nutrition through my own struggles. So I get really excited about having that, professional background of being a dietitian, but also really having that empathy for the women that are struggling with HA too, because I, was there myself.
Yeah, and we're so happy to have you, Cynthia, because you've also been developing many important resources for the women that are part of our Facebook group. And it's been really, really helpful. I know that for myself, like with the women that come to me and that I coach for body image mostly, I still use a lot of your resources as well, kind of, helping them really understand which foods are the best in recovery or not. So we're very excited to have
I
you
am
on
so
today.
excited to be here, and I'm so excited this is coming together for all of us.
Yeah.
So our first question for you today is that most of us with HA got the condition from a combination of underfueling and overexercise in an attempt to control our physical appearance. How did this play out in your life?
Oh yes. So yep, that's me. Physical appearance all the way, which I'm pretty sure it's probably every single other woman that is struggling with HA, whether they know it or not.
Absolutely.
That it's definitely all comes back to that physical appearance. So how did this start for me? It started back, when I was a child. And, I saw my mom counting calories. I, saw her exercising all the time. And she never projected any of that on me. She wasn't like, okay, Cynthia, you need to exercise or you need to eat, whatever. I mean, she let me have cake for breakfast. She let me be intuitive as possible. So it really wasn't until I would say high school, when I was getting ready for my senior ball that I was like, oh, maybe I need to go on a diet. And I was always really active. So it never, my image never, I never thought of it before till about then. And so that's when I kind of started, playing around with dieting and restricting calories, exercising more. And then when college came and I decided that my first path career was I wanted to be a physician's assistant. And then I just totally sucked in math. So, and then I was like, oh, I didn't even know there was such a thing, becoming a dietitian. And so that's when it started out. And I thought, when I was in college, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'm going to be a dietitian, I have to be like the image of health. I have to have, the fittest body. I have to eat the healthiest foods because, oh gosh, what are people going to think of me if I don't?
Mhm.
So, I really started exercising a ton and, following a pretty strict diet around my college years. And then I think it was maybe around about a year before I was getting married. And I was like, oh, I was on birth control for so long. I was put on birth control back when I was like 15 years old because I had quote unquote polycystic ovaries.
Mhm.
And I actually had really painful periods and very inconsistent periods. So I'm not really sure what was going on then, but put me on the pill.
To be honest, this is something I learned really recently, but it's very normal to have inconsistent periods as a young
Yeah.
girl, being 15 and your body is kind of still gearing up. And yeah, I was listening to another physician. I think I'm not sure anymore who it was, but they said like, you start your periods, but then they come sometimes irregularly, or they might be a bit painful sometimes, and there's nothing to really be scared of. Like, it's just really your body is kind of getting into gear for regular menstruation. And I find that so many of us in our generation, it sounds really grandma when I say this, but in our generation, we were put on the
So many
pill
people.
really early
Yeah.
Yeah.
on. Just like that. Like for me, the pill was because of acne. I have acne. Okay, get on the pill.
Mhm.
Your period is not regular. Oh, get on the pill. It's annoying you that you have a period. Get on the pill. It's kind of, and I can't say that I didn't benefit from that. Like I didn't complain about it,
Yeah.
but still, it's a bit problematic because we don't really allow for the body to really kind of find its space, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, that's something that I think many of us can relate to, being put on the pill so
Yes.
early. But so sorry, I interrupted you. By that time, how old were you?
So I was in my mid-20s. So when I came off
Mm-hmm.
the pill, so, 10 plus years. And I just thought, okay, well, I've been on the pill for so long. I'm getting married soon. And, I want to make sure my body
Yeah.
is doing what it needs to do because eventually I want to have kids. And then
Yeah.
my period didn't come. And I'm like, okay, well, I heard that's normal after the pill. And I would go to my doctor. Oh, it's normal. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. And then I continued on with my typical over exercising, under fueling. And plus I was gearing up for my wedding. So that kicked me up a notch.
There are so many
The wedding
people. I mean,
diet.
oh, it's really a shame that people feel that they need to change their bodies so much for that one day, and it can really ruin a lot of things for the long term.
And if you think about it, I'm going to take like a little side note, but none of us are in a larger body, right? We can all fit in normal sizes. But if you talk to women that are actually living in larger bodies, the wedding industry is terrible to them because there is nothing available. And then if you want something available in your size, you actually have to pay extra
Mhm.
money, which I find is like ridiculous and disgusting. And I find that the whole wedding industry is kind of geared towards women have to like be their smallest, right? And it's
Yeah.
just unbelievable.
Yep. And really, I mean, for
Yeah.
me, when I was doing that, I thought it was normal behavior, because everyone does it. And
Yeah.
looking back now, I look back and I'm like, I missed out on a lot because I was worried about, did I get my exercise in today? And, my wedding dress fitting is coming up. I better not have that cheeseburger I really want. And yeah, it was just, it takes away from the actual reason why you're getting married. Why are you getting married? Because you love your significant other,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, and the experience
Yes,
of it all, right? It's so
yes,
fun planning a wedding, enjoying being with your family so much. Like everybody's kind of get
yes.
excited for you, and you buy a lot of nice stuff when you plan a nice wedding as well. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit
Yeah,
sad.
so
You kind of
that kicked it up.
lose
That
out.
took it to a higher level for me with the over exercising and under fueling. And at that time, I didn't see anything wrong with it because that's what society tells us to do. We got to have the
Mm-hmm.
perfect body for our wedding. And if I could tell my old self anything, I'd be like, no, don't. It's not about that. It's about so much more. And now I look back on these pictures of my wedding album, and yes, they're beautiful pictures, but knowing where I am now with, my body comfort and knowing where I was then, I kind of wish I don't want to say flip flop it, but be in a different place. But
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer wherever you are is where you're supposed to be. And then and there, that was my path, which
Mm-hmm.
ultimately led me here. So, but after the wedding, of course, because I was on this super strict diet and exercise regimen, of course, I gained some weight back, and which led me into another, dieting phase where, oh, I gotta lose the weight. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got in, this is right about when I got into CrossFitting. And, I
Mm.
used to be a gymnast way back in the day. And
Hmm.
I'm like, oh, I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked, the kind of gymnasticsy stuff that was in it still. And, I found a like for lifting weights, but, looking back now, why was I doing it? I was
Mm-hmm.
doing it to change my body.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that again, we kicked it up another notch. And this time I was married, so I'm like, well, I don't want kids right away, but let me start thinking about it. So I went back off the pill because I went back on it because I was like, oh, I can't
Hmm.
have my period for my wedding, of course, or my honeymoon. so, so I went back off of it, and then that's when my journey began of like, okay, why am I not getting a period? I'm gonna want to have babies
Hmm.
soon. I know I can't if I'm not getting a period. So it took a good few years of many doctors diagnosing me with PCOS. And
Yeah.
also, saying, "Oh, no big deal. You're not having a period. Just go on the pill or come see me for fertility treatments when you're ready to get pregnant." And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "No, why?" And this was before, really before No Period Now What, you know, and I
Hmm.
didn't have, any resources really to look into. And honestly, when I was in college, because a couple people have asked me, "Well, you're a dietitian. Why didn't you know you weren't eating enough?" And at
Yeah.
the time, I wasn't losing any weight, and
Mm-hmm.
what I was taught in school, it was like, okay, you eat less, move more, you lose weight. That's just how energy balance
Yeah.
goes. So I'm like, I must be fine. And there was maybe like a couple paragraphs in my one of my medical nutrition therapy books of eating disorders and HA, and I'm like, well, I'm got a healthy BMI. That doesn't fit me. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when
Yeah.
I moved on. And then finally, long story short, I found a reproductive endocrinologist that diagnosed me with HA. So,
So by that time, how long do you think you
oh
had it?
gosh, I probably had it for at least 3, 4 years, if not more. I mean, I was on the pill, so this could have started back, in college. So, um, but that diagnosis of PCOS drove me another level
Mm-hmm.
higher because I'm like,
Of
"Oh, I
course.
can't have diabetes and I gotta be super healthy. I gotta restrict my carbs because I'm gonna get, insulin sensitive." And honestly, when I was going through all that and I was convinced I had PCOS because no one was telling me any different, I had, I think, an insulin test done. Can't remember the exact test, but
Yeah.
it showed me that I was insulin resistant. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like coming back now. I'm like, yeah, because all of a sudden you ate some carbs and you weren't eating carbs before. Your body was like, what?
Yeah. It's
You know?
Yeah.
dieting as well,
Yes,
right? Dieting can totally make you insulin
yes.
Yeah.
resistant,
So
which I think, doctors never asked
yes,
about that as well. And if they tell you have PCOS and you diet, they will say, good for you. Keep
Yeah.
going.
So quick sidebar for me. The PCOS misdiagnosis for somebody that has HA is really, really common. So if there's anyone who's listening who has been told that you have PCOS, but you've been doing this underfueling and overexercising diet thing, please check out my page at noperiod.info/HAVS-PCOS. You can download the chapter of the book that talks about this for free, because I think it's incredibly important that people get the correct diagnosis in terms of whether you have HA or PCOS, because the path forward for those two conditions is quite different. So it's important to get it right.
It's
Yeah,
like the
and
two
for
extremes,
me,
right?
that PCOS diagnosis from my doctor drove me deeper into HA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yes, and you know what? I would say, Nicola, take that resource, everyone listening out there, and share it with your doctor. Share it with your doctor.
Yeah.
Spread the
They
word.
don't know about it.
So yeah, so that's kind of where it came to be. And then finally I found a reproductive endocrinologist that wasn't all about like, okay, let's get you pregnant, to like, oh, you're not having a period because you're exercising too much and you're not eating enough. I'm like, huh? It was just mind blowing.
That must have been such a shock,
Yeah.
right? Because by that time you're already practicing as a dietitian, right? So you are effectively this picture of health, right? And you're effectively giving
Mhm.
diets to other people, not knowing that it could actually also be dangerous for
Yes.
them or
Yes.
cause other issues. How did that
So
process?
it was like, well, I'm healthy. And I think so many women struggle with this too, is like, well, I was doing everything I could to be my healthiest self.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? I, I don't feel guilty. I don't want anyone out there to feel guilty as well, because I didn't know. And most likely you may not know either, that you were just trying to do what society tells you to do in regards to health.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure if anyone ever read the book Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison. Really, really
Oh,
great book. It goes into the
best
history,
book ever.
goes into the history of dieting and how it's like, not only is it, in our faces every single day, but it's ingrained in like ancestry. Our
Hmm.
moms. I mean, it dates back to like the 1800s. It's really crazy. So, that to me it was a shock. And then as I embarked on learning more about hypothalamic amenorrhea, I come to find out, all right, this is not healthy. Too much of something isn't, healthy for me. And no one should feel guilt out there about that unless they know, but sometimes it's hard to break those behaviors, and it didn't flip a switch for me overnight. And I'll share more about that. But that image of health and
Mm-hmm.
what we think it is. But here's the thing: if you're not getting your period, you're not healthy,
You're
right?
not healthy. No.
So then that's when we got to kind of, go against society's norms and truly make ourselves, healthy and get our periods back.
Yeah.
And
And I think it's really interesting you say the image of healthy, because I think that's what the problem is. The idea of healthy is based on how you look physically as opposed to what your blood work looks like. Are you getting your period? How much are you having to pee? Is it an inordinate amount? Are you cold all the time? Is your hair brittle? All of those things that's health. Like, health is not, do you have a six pack and the vein running down your bicep, which was my like absolute goal. Like, oh my gosh, I want that vein. Like, that tells you nothing about actual health, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's also about your well being, like
Hmm.
how well do you feel, right? I mean, for a lot of us struggling with over exercising, under eating, there's so much anxiety,
Mm,
right? Your life is completely like you're not even present for life, right?
Yeah.
That's what you were
Yes.
saying, Cynthia, about like getting ready to get married and not even kind of being present for that. And I think, yeah, to me, health is really kind of the state of well-being that is not just physical, it's also mental, which is really, really important. And the more you interact with women that have lost their periods, you can tell they're not feeling very well, right? But if they look a certain way, then they tend to put aside all these kind of small, annoying symptoms that they might have, because they're like, it certainly cannot be something bad, because if I have that six pack, then I'm good.
exactly.
Cynthia, what were your next steps after you got this diagnosis of HA? Where did you go from there?
So I had to definitely take a step back, and I'm like, no, like how could I have missed this, you know? And instead of dwelling on that, I really said, all right, I gotta stop exercising. And in a way, it was sort of a relief because my training schedule and my deepest over exercising was like 2 hours training before work, and I would work 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Then I would come home, not every day, but I would run a few miles. And, a lot of
Oh
times women will
God.
say, well, I exercise for stress relief. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that was
Mm-hmm.
totally me, totally me. And, looking back, I would if I missed a workout, oh my god, my whole day was off. Gosh, don't talk to
Mm-hmm.
me, I missed my workout
Mm.
today. Or I would, restrict food because, oh, I didn't get my workout in today. So yeah, I thought I was exercising for stress relief, but no. That's definitely I was exercising to change my body.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be honest here. So once I was, diagnosed with HA, I'm like, all right, well, it was a relief to stop exercising. And I did. I stopped exercising cold turkey. I did some walking and, some general gentle stuff. And the eating more was sort of a relief, but that guilt was still there because
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, this
Mhm.
isn't healthy for me. And in
Yeah.
all actuality, I didn't know it quite yet, but calories were my healthy, food that had a good amount of calories in it, maybe, like cheeseburgers, avocados, French fries. That was my healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That was good for me to eat. So it did take some time
Yeah.
to be comfortable, with eating more and eating different foods, because I was used to eating how can I get as much food as possible in the lowest amount of calories, right?
Yeah. Because I think also as a dietitian, it's a little bit how you are trained, right?
Mhm.
So these beliefs must have been maybe even
Yeah.
more
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
ingrained in your mind that this is not safe. Like cake, not healthy. Fries, not healthy, right? Fast food or whatever, like processed foods, not healthy. And I think I really salute you to kind of turn that around because it's not just something that you have integrated from the world around you and the culture and possibly generations before, but it's also something that you were taught and that you had to apply as a job day in, day out. So I think kind of putting that back into question is it must have been really, really hard. So, but it seemed like you kind of went all in quite fast, or would you say it took you a little bit of time?
So once I officially had the diagnosis, and I think too, you know, if no period now what was around when I was going through this, I think that I would have been able to not have to have this HA diagnosis from a doctor because I think a lot of times women question like if they don't get that diagnosis from their doctor that it's not like real or something. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think, just coming from my background of, having, sciency and, I have my master's degree as well, that I would have looked at all this amazing research that Nicola did. And she was probably doing it as I was going through HA. So, that I would have been able to, make that solid decision like, this fits me. This is me.
Mm-hmm.
So, ladies out there, I don't want to say Nicola, can diagnose you because we're not, medical doctors. But if you fit the criteria of everything that is in no period, now what? You have HA. You don't need your doctor to tell you that. Is that okay that I say that?
Yeah. And I think it's also very scary to go against what your doctor says if you
Yeah.
don't get the right diagnosis, which is, in your story, it's the same. It took years to get there. I know in my case, like when my doctor diagnosed me, it was a bit like you. It was kind of, well, if you don't want to have a baby, then you go back on the pill. So you get a period. If you want to have a baby, then you can try and have IVF. And I remember, reading what Nicola was sharing at the time. So pre-book,
Hmm.
right? But I remember thinking, how is that legit, right? It's hard. And I think having the book is such a great resource because you can really also discuss it with your doctor. As you say, like
Mhm.
bring it to your doctor and say, but what
Mhm.
about this? I found this, and this is all kind of referenced. It's not something that somebody took out of a magician hat. But to me, I remember like it was a bit scary to kind of go all in because I felt like this is effectively going against what my doctor
Mhm.
said, right? My doctor never said, oh, you could try to change your practices. No, that was not an option. So I think there's definitely a bit of that, which I like to see that now a lot of the ladies that kind of read the book and understand what it is about, I find that there's less of that fear of thinking, but it's not going to
Yeah.
work, right? So I think the research that you did, Nicola, has just been life-changing on so
Absolutely.
many levels because it is already hard enough to go and confront your doctor about the fact that they didn't diagnose you properly and that there is a way to recover naturally. But actually not having any resources in that sense was really
Yeah.
isolating. I mean, how did you feel about that,
Yes,
Cynthia?
and that is a good word to describe it. And two, I just want to make note, and nothing against anyone's doctor out there, because doctors, right? Would you say they're trained to treat by meds? You know, not
Yeah.
many out there. Some are, are trained to treat by preventative or like let's find out the underlying issue. So, that's what they're trained to do. So, I don't want anyone to be
Mhm.
mad at their doctor for misdiagnosing. They only know what they know too. So
Sorry, I also think that HA is, we see it all the time because it's the space we're in, but
yes,
for the average medical doctor, they're probably not seeing very much of it. I mean, a lot of it is masked by people being on the birth control pill.
yeah,
And so it's only
Yeah.
when somebody comes off the pill and, the incidence rate is something like 1%. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I've even spoken with one of the top reproductive endocrinologists here in Boston. He said that he was seeing maybe 1 to 2 cases per year. So for your average general practitioner, they're not
yeah.
seeing this. They're not aware of it. They see PCOS a lot more because that's, the prevalence is about 10 to 15 times as much as it is HA. So I think that's
Yeah.
another issue,
Mhm.
is just there isn't the education that the
Yeah,
doctors have received. So
yeah, yeah.
And as you said, Cynthia, even as a dietitian, there is not a lot of knowledge of eating disorders, for example. I know you don't have to have a clinical eating disorder to have HA, but the reality is, I think a lot of doctors kind of associate it with, unless you're really kind of super
Yes,
underweight
exactly.
and really, really sick with anorexia, you could
Mhm.
not possibly lose your period. And just again, because they don't spend a lot of time discussing what eating disorders look like or how to really understand them. And I know a lot of NGOs, everywhere in the world have to actually really spend a lot of time training, primary care practitioners just to show them this could also be HA, this could also be an eating disorder. It doesn't have to be that the person is really emaciated, which I think in a lot of cases it's also that, right? They kind of look at your BMI, and if you're quote unquote normal, they say, well, it can't be HA,
it can, it is.
which
Yeah,
is
yeah, absolutely.
it totally is, right? But then nobody asks questions to you, right? How do you feel about food? Like, do you allow all the foods, and how often do you exercise? Like, if somebody would have asked you those questions, and you say to the person, I'm exercising kind of 3 hours a day, maybe they would have said, wow, that's a bit much,
Mhm.
right? But yeah, the questions just don't.
You might also have gotten that's great. Keep exercising. It's good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you. I
I guess,
Yeah.
"Oh,
mean,
you're so
Oh
healthy.
yeah.
Keep going. Do
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
doing." Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if they think you have PCOS
Mhm.
as well, right? They kind of, there's this, that's the other question, because there's a lot of misunderstanding with PCOS as well, and how much dieting can help, which I find that it doesn't. But yeah, so there's a whole bunch of
Absolutely.
things going
Yes,
on,
it
which
is
is like
very
not easy to know
many
about
layers
when
to
you're
it
in the
for
middle
sure.
Yeah.
of it
Yeah.
all. Yeah. So basically, once you started really exercising less and eating more, and what happened? Like, how did you kind of fight that
Yeah, like you
guilt
said, it
also
was
of eating more?
very, very extremely isolating, because everyone around
Hmm.
you is eating healthy or on a diet and it's like it makes you question yourself
Mm-hmm.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
I knew after doing a little bit of my research, that that's what I had to do. So I, bit by bit, I ate more, I didn't exercise, and I came across, because of course I, went to Mr. Google, Dr. Google, and Googled hypothalamic amenorrhea. And what I found was, I don't know, can't remember exactly what I found. I don't think I found any resources from Nicola yet because it was still early on. But I did end up typing that same into Facebook, and I came across a Facebook group. And I think at the time there was like maybe like 75 to 100 girls
Mm-hmm.
in it. And I know,
Yeah.
Nicola, you were one of them in there. And I think it was admin by Anna
Yep. Yep.
Phelan. And so that was helpful to be able to kind of relate
Yeah.
and, throw some things back and forth. And then I got impatient. I got impatient and I was like, I'm going to fertility treatments, because I think a lot of times we think, well, I know if I do fertility treatments, that has the outcome of pregnancy. And I was getting
Yeah.
older, which at the time I really wasn't older. I think it was 29 or 30. And so I got impatient and I decided to do fertility treatments. My insurance covered it, so I'm like, okay, well, I got nothing to lose financially. And that's when that's when I don't have the best memory sometimes. So, and if Nicole, if you remember sooner, let me know. But I think I had messaged you, and I was like, oh, I'm going through fertility treatment, and I doctor recommended X, Y, or Z. And you're like, no, I think you said to stay on one of the ovulation medication that was oral for a little bit longer. Anyways, after 3 rounds, by your recommendations, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also,
Boom. She
yes,
did
she
it
did it
again.
again. So yes, I have Nicola to thank for my first son. And then I also think, fertility treatments isn't like the end all be all. Like, just because you're doing fertility treatments doesn't mean you're going to conceive. So I failed 2 rounds. I was overstimulated once. I was out of work for 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so fertility treatments sucked. And I think finally, when I was at my third or fourth round, I can't remember, I was like, I just got to let go of this control, this perfectionism, and really just let myself be.
Mhm.
And when pregnancy is supposed to happen, it's going, to happen. And at the time I was still,
Mhm.
eating, I was still trying to do less exercise, but there was times where I was like, screw this isn't working. Like, I'm going to start exercising
Yeah.
again. And then no, 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 no. You have these games and voices in your head that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, so
Recovery is definitely not linear, right? So there's a lot of back and
exactly.
forth, and you kind of put the steps in, and then you freak out. Maybe you gained a bit of weight, maybe you gained a bit faster than you thought, and you kind of go back and you're like, but no, no, nobody said this is going to work, right? And there's a lot of fear, and it's totally normal to go kind of back and forth that
Yeah,
way.
absolutely. So yeah, that was, just a bit of the fertility journey, but it was hard because I had this lifestyle where exercise was my life, and then all of a sudden I just gave it up. And there was questions in my mind like, what are my friends going to think at the CrossFit gym? And I was one of the top female athletes there at the time, and all these things running through your head. And then you don't get your period back right away because you think it's just instantaneous,
Yeah.
that they just get your period back after you've like tried to run your body into the ground for so many years. So the impatience, though, you know um if I could go back and tell myself to be more patient. And I think that's one of the biggest things, aside from eating more, exercising less, and really working on that underlying reason of why your period went missing in the first place, is that having that patience.
Yeah.
Because if I had that patience,
Mhm.
maybe I wouldn't have embarked on fertility treatment and went through all of that. I mean, you're talking tons of ultrasounds, you're talking lots of blood work,
Yeah.
that out of work for 3 weeks because one of my ovaries could possibly explode. Um, you know, so
That is so stressful. And I think it doesn't surprise me also that, if you give up working out, so when you were used to do it so much and you have nothing to replace that, mentally, it is so hard. It's really draining to think like, can't work out, can't work out, can't work out. And I'm going
Yeah.
crazy, right? And I have to eat more and everything at the same time. And I think if there's something that I see is really different for the women recovering now compared to us, maybe between kind of 10 and 5 years ago, I guess, it's really that emphasis also on what you do with your
Hmm.
mind, because your mind can really, be very powerful. And I don't think like it's so hindsight is this beautiful thing, right? So we kind of think like, oh, had I known about this, then I wouldn't have gone through fertility treatments. But just to share something with you, I remember that on the last kind of check that I did with a reproductive endocrinologist, he kind of looked at my blood test and he said, well, this is going actually in the right direction. I think you should wait a little bit longer. By that time, it must have been just half a year that I was all in. I cried so bad because all I wanted was actually to go to fertility treatments. And the guy was telling me, just wait another couple of months and see what happens. And I cried, like literally, I think I cried for 2 days. I was like, I want this to happen now. It was just impossible. So I think this impatience, a lot of us can probably relate
Mhm.
to. And it's probably a bit the name of the
Hmm.
game, right? It's really saying like, it's okay. You got to sit on your hands right now and you got to, pick up a new hobby maybe, or do something else, or reach out to friends, but you cannot work out. And yes, you will have to eat more. And that mental part is really,
And
really
I think
tricky, I
especially
find.
for women that have HA, we tend to be doers and active and
Oh, yeah.
busy, busy, busy,
Hyper.
busy. And
Yeah,
sitting on our hands is really, really hard. I did, when I was
absolutely.
working on recovery,
Absolutely.
I picked up a cross stitch. It was an alphabet sampler and it took me 26 hours per letter. So you can
Wow.
multiply that. There was 600
Jeez.
hours to finish the whole thing and it is finished. So that was my hobby that I picked up when I was not exercising. So
Awesome.
did you have
Amazing.
a did you have something else that you filled your time with, Cynthia?
I did. I picked up very gentle yoga,
Hmm.
nothing strenuous at all, and meditation, breathing, really kind of trying to go inwards with myself versus like always trying to control the external. And so I picked that up and I just really started having fun again, letting loose, staying up late because I didn't have to go to the gym in the morning.
Hmm.
Laughing, connecting with old friends, connecting with my husband, just doing like fun kid like behavior. And that was I feel like one of my most freest times I have ever had in my life. So I think that, along with that inward and then that external fun, having fun and letting loose, really helped me a
Yeah.
lot.
That's great. I think that's definitely a great tip for anyone to keep, is kind of let go a little
Yes,
bit
because
more, right?
us HAers, as type A doers, we are like boom, boom, boom. We're scheduled.
Yeah,
We don't really, trickle off to, the unknown or what have
Yep.
you. So
true.
yes, definitely having fun,
That's
laughing.
great. And so did you end up conceiving with the
I did.
fertility
I
treatments?
did. So I
Okay.
ended up conceiving, I think it was the third or fourth round. And after Nicola was like, stay on, I can't remember the med it was, stay on this a little bit longer to see if you ovulate, because I was on injectables as well. Um, and so I still remember the day where I was at work. I had to travel that day and I was calling to see if my pregnancy test was positive. My heart was pounding. And she's like, oh, you probably already know. I'm like, what? She's like, that you're pregnant. I'm like, no, I didn't know. You told me not to test.
You actually listened to them?
Yeah. So, but that, oh my gosh, that 2 week wait between, hopefully, getting pregnant into actually getting a positive pregnancy test. So yeah. And I just was like, because I mean, for years I knew I couldn't conceive, naturally unless I got my
Hmm.
period back. And to make that a reality, was just, I'll
It's
never
big.
forget that. And I'll definitely never forget, Nicola helping me along, the way. Very grateful. So yeah, then flash forward, to now, let's see, not to now, but to I have another son, so I have two little boys, and my second son I actually conceived naturally. I got my period back naturally, and
Okay.
still, I even got it back while I was nursing. This
Hmm.
was 13, I think 13
Oh,
months
wow.
postpartum. And I'm like, oh, awesome. I was super excited because a part of me was like, oh, should I stop nursing and see if my period's going to come back? And I'm like, you know what? Enjoy this time nursing because I really enjoyed
Yep.
nursing a lot. Not in the beginning, but at the later part. And so it came back, and then a few months later, I was pregnant again, and I didn't
Great.
plan on it. It was one of those oopsie pregnancies that I thought, like, oh, damn, those women that could get, pregnant by oopsie.
Hmm.
But yeah, it happened. I didn't think it was that easy, and we were planning on another child eventually, but so yeah, so that was, my fertility journey. And now, fast forward to that, I'm on a strict 28-day cycle, and I like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have my period all the time. Something I'll always be
I
grateful
know,
for.
right?
So, what did recovering from HA and the all in process teach you?
Oh my gosh, it taught me so much. Really, I think the biggest thing was, perseverance, knowing that I could, overcome, anything. I didn't have to control everything that was happening in my life,
Hmm.
which really helped me when I became a mom because talk about not planning or uncontrolled stuff happening. Oh my gosh.
Totally.
I totally thank my HA for um, motherhood because I am that much more relaxed as a mom, that much more go
Hmm.
with the flow. Because up until I recovered HA, and like everything was had to be so or planned, etc. And when it comes to kids, expect the unexpected, which I don't have to tell you, ladies, do I? Um, so, it really taught me too that my dream life is so much more important than my dream body and so much more fun.
Oh, I love that.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and
So
because if you think about it, I mean, back when I was trying to get my dream body, I was miserable. I wasn't eating enough. I wasn't having fun. I was cold all the time. I was missing out on being present. If we had birthday parties or whatever outings with friends, it wasn't about like, okay, I'm enjoying my time with my family. I was like, oh my gosh, if I eat this, I'm going to have to do blah blah blah.
Hmm.
So having my dream life versus my dream body is so much more fun. Um and I really feel like it's made me the person who I am today. And going through such unknown and if you want to call it hardship or whatever, that I think it's helped prepare me for bigger things that have happened in my life, one being motherhood. The second, my husband was diagnosed back in January with a brain tumor, and I
Mm.
think if I was still in a place of like super anxiety, back in my HA days, that big life event would have crippled me. Was it hard when it happened? Absolutely. But I think, not having that anxiety of my own internal anxiety and that perfectionism and that ability to control made it, I don't want to say made it easier, but made it a little bit more manageable.
Yeah.
Um, so I think HA
course.
recovery, full deep HA recovery, and I'm not just saying like get your period back and be done with
Right.
it, but I'm talking like mind, body, soul, making sure you're healed with food, you're, free around food, free around your body, really, gave me the tools to kind of offset such, life-changing events.
And remind us, your husband is okay
Yes,
right
he is
now?
doing great. We actually just had he has to have recurrent MRIs every 3 months right now, and we actually just
Yeah.
had our second one since his tumor removal back in January. So we'll get results soon, to say, hopefully nothing is growing back. And I'm positive thoughts bring positive things. So I'm very, you know, positive that everything is just going to be okay, and we're going to be able to get back on with quote unquote normal life in
Yeah.
our,
Really
We're
so
keeping it
hoping
all
for that.
crossed.
yes, me too. Thank you
Yeah,
for asking.
absolutely. We're keeping it all crossed for him and for you and
Yeah.
your boys. So one of the kind of bonus questions that we ask on this podcast is also kind of how are you all in right now? So we use it more in a kind of broad sense, right? Kind of putting
Mhm.
all your cards on the table and being your authentic, genuine self and not holding back, really being free to also make your decisions and be strong. So what would you say is kind of making you all in at this moment, or I don't know,
Yes.
this
And
week?
I have to say, I love this question because, getting your period back, yes, we know is just so much more than getting your period back, but it's really, you know, after recovery, it doesn't like, it just doesn't cut off. You're always, you know, recovering from something and trying to be, I guess, all
Yeah.
in with something, like you said, being true to yourself. And I'm not going to lie, there's still a bit of perfectionism in me. I feel like, right? I mean, so
Join the
yeah.
club, Cynthia, join the club.
So, and having a hint of perfectionism is helpful with work, for sure, and managing a family and keeping some things somewhat, I don't want to say somewhat scheduled, but not so chaotic all the time. But
Yeah.
I try my best to have balance in my life between work, family, me time, and time with friends. It's always a work in progress because I always say, oh my gosh, there's not enough hours in the day, and I'm sure you guys can say the same thing. But scheduling in time to take time for myself, scheduling in time to hang out with friends, because there's so many times where I'm like, oh my gosh, today has just, between work and kids, like the life has been sucked out of me. And I have plans with a couple of my girlfriends that I haven't seen in a while, and it's like I almost feel like I have to like drag myself out because I'm just so tired. But I know that it's so important to be able to, interact face to face,
Hmm.
and have these like conversations and just, take a back seat from your true life's priorities, such as either being a mom, having your career or what have you. So, finding that balance, always a work in progress. And really, I want to say, I don't want to say I'm spot on, but when I'm tired and I need to rest, I rest.
Hmm.
There's no, in between, as long as I can. Obviously, I can't rest when there's two little boys running around. But for example, today for nap time, I'm going to lay down with my older son while my younger son is napping, and we're going to take a family nap.
Oh,
Um,
lovely.
so yes, I love napping, and that's one thing I couldn't do before before HA recovery. Oh my gosh, no,
Hmm.
gotta check it off
Hmm.
the to-do list. But,
Hmm.
knowing now I can rest and then be that much more happy, productive, joyful, etc., present. Um, rather than always checking off the to-do list. So, and I love what I do. I love, working with women across the world to help them really heal their relationship with food, so that A, they can get their period back, B, they can never lose their period again. Um, and I love what I do. So I find myself working a lot, and
Yeah.
it brings me joy.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
at the same time, I know it's very important to have that self-care and take a break, and spend time with the people that I really enjoy being around. And before I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go hang out with so and so. Now it's like, you know what, I really pick and choose who I'm going to hang out with, because A, time is of the essence. And you want to support, you want to surround yourself with people that are supportive to you and your authentic self.
Mm,
Yeah.
So, I
makes
try not to
sense.
do anything that doesn't wholeheartedly bring me joy or happiness, aside from laundry and cleaning my toilets or whatever. That I don't
Unfortunately, that doesn't
know.
disappear, even if you're your authentic, genuine
Yes.
best self. Laundry is still there. What about you, Nicola, this week? Like, how have you kind of been all in true to yourself?
I have also actually been spending a lot of time with friends this week. It was a challenging week in terms of finding out that the school plans, we're still in COVID times for anyone who's listening to this down the road. School plans have changed once again. And so that was challenging. But I spent a night with a couple of nights with a couple of really, really good friends. And it definitely helps recharge my soul and my spirit. And taking that time away from the family obligations and just doing something for me has been really, really great this week. How about you, Florence?
Not being a mother, not being a professional, not being a business
Yeah,
owner, not being a coach,
absolutely.
being just an individual, a
Yeah, I
friend,
said my
it's
birthday is
nice.
actually coming up next week, and I told my husband, I
Ooh.
said, all I want is to like just be alone for the day and just maybe read books or whatever. And
Books.
I love being a mom, and I know you ladies do as well. But it's important to have that break. So
I don't think anybody can be a great mom 24/7 all the time. Like I don't know any. I know there are women that really kind of thrive when they're constantly with their kids, and it's wonderful. But most of the women I know, they all need a
Yes.
break. It's kind of just don't
Yeah.
touch me. It's like, nobody asks me anything right now. Just like leave me alone. And the thing is, you don't need a lot, right? You don't need a lot to just
yeah.
feel back, feel you're ready to be back and really happy and enjoy that time with them. So I totally agree. I was all in this week. Feeling my emotions. I think this is also something that I learned over time, is to allow myself to feel difficult emotions when they arise. And just like you, Nicola, with the whole school situation is kind of throwing me for a loop a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. Um, and I was really angry. And this is something I learned, I would say a little bit later in recovery. It was not kind of at the first step, but is to really feel those difficult emotions and sit with them instead of trying to distract myself
Mhm.
from them. So it's a bit odd, maybe, but this week, that's how I've been true to myself, is letting myself be angry and agree that it was a difficult situation. And then showing myself some
Yeah.
self-compassion, which I find that is also really, really helpful in recovery as well, is to kind of be compassionate to yourself and say, it's
Yes.
hard,
Yep.
it
Yes.
sucks, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then I had one more question for you,
Yeah.
Cynthia, just out of my own curiosity. Do you think the whole process of recovering, having your period again and being able to conceive naturally, did that inform the choice you made of being a non-diet dietitian?
Absolutely. 100%.
Mm.
To make a long story short, through my own struggles, I was like, okay, and even before my own struggles, something didn't feel right. Like about like telling women they have to like eat calorie controlled diets or macro count or whatever. I never felt completely self fulfilled with
Mm-hmm.
it. It was kind of like, all
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yeah.
this is my job, this is what I do, whatever. And then through, my own struggles is where, I started, researching. I'm like, oh my gosh, there are other dietitians out there that are, doing this. And I'm like, okay. So that made me feel a little bit more, I don't want to say, good with my decision of doing that, but it's like it's a thing, there is
Mhm.
another side to this uh, our need to control our bodies and diet and all that. So and that I think was a little bit before the whole uh HA like really going all in, but going all in and eating more, helped me learn that you don't have to eat a certain way or exercise every single day to be healthy. And I actually came across this was a while ago, a quote, and I don't know who it was from. It could just been a, a bunch of people saying it, but all the kale in the world won't save you if you're feeling batshit crazy around food, right? So we're thinking like, okay, I
Mhm.
got to eat all, clean, etc. And that was me. Like I was feeling literally batshit crazy because I couldn't eat this, couldn't eat that.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so being able to not only live that and now also share that with, the world has, me excited to wake up every single day and do what I do from the bottom, of my heart, and to be able to feel, you know, have empathy for these women, and these women to know that I get it. Like I've
Yeah.
been there and I understand
Yeah.
that trust process, which is huge when you're, recovering from any kind of disordered eating, or eating disorder. Just having
Mhm.
trust in that person you're working with, it opens up so many more doors for recovery. So
Trust.
yes, that is how it happened, and there's not any way I could turn back. And I actually had one of my clients ask me, because she knows that my husband owns a pre-prepared meal business,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and she's like, and I don't want to say he's diety, but you know, it's not like he's promoting what I do, and that's fine. But she asked me how I do that, because I do help them with some work on that end. I said, I tell him quite frankly, if someone is looking for like nutrition support consultation, that I don't do weight loss. I help them heal their
Mhm.
relationship
Mhm.
with food, so that they don't have to diet ever again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I bridge that gap,
Mhm.
and and he's respectful of it. He understands it. He gets it. So that's kind of how I merged my two worlds.
That's amazing.
That's wonderful. Do you have any other
Well,
questions, Nicola?
I was going to say, can you tell people how they can find you if they would like to work with you?
Yes, thank you for asking
Yes.
that. So they can find me on Instagram, period dot nutritionist. I'm also on Facebook, but not as much. You could also friend request me, Cynthia Donovan. But Instagram is really where I live. And you can also find me in the No Period Now What Facebook group, because I also help
Yes.
admin along with Nicola and Florence and a few other amazing women in there. So that's where you can find me. And any questions, I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much for being
Thank
with us
That was
you.
today.
great.
Yes, it was so much fun just hanging out and having a conversation. I know we don't often get to meet up and chat. So
Yeah.
this is
Can you believe we had to start a podcast for us to chat?
fun. Hey.
Well, it was wonderful. And, thank you so much for sharing your story and your struggles and what helped you. I hope this is helpful to many other women. I know it is. And really, I really like your Instagram. I think it's very powerful. You've kind of really dissected a lot of the issues and the fears around food and exercise and body. So I really encourage anyone who's not following you to go ahead and do that,
Thank you.
because I always find it very, very spot on.
Yes,
I'm like,
absolutely.
yes, oh my God, yes, I used to have that too. I used to do this too. So it's
Yes, thank
great.
you. And thank you for having me. I had so much fun, and I hope to do this again in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have you again. If we really pick up on something more specific, that is really the resort of a dietitian. I think it would be great to have you again and speak more
Yeah,
specifically about
absolutely.
those issues.
Awesome. Thanks, ladies.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Maybe take a few minutes to reflect on it and how you have been all in this past week. It always strikes me how different each person's all-in journey is. As I often say, there are many paths to HA and many paths out of it. Your journey is unique.
That is so true. And if you need more support on your journey, you should definitely start with No Period Now What, which you can get at noperiod.info/book.
And Florence and I both work with people on different aspects of period recovery and so much more. So if you'd like more personal advice and attention, you can go to noperiod.info/appointments to schedule a time to speak with me on fixing the issues underlying your missing periods and figuring out what those issues are.
And I'm at beyondbodyimage.com to work with me on the deeper emotional issues and your body image. I also run a French Instagram account, aminore_fr. And obviously you can find Nicola at no period now what on Instagram. We also have joint clients, so you can access both our domains of expertise at the same time. If you enjoyed this podcast and found it helpful, please drop us a review to help more people find it.
Also, join the No Period Now What recovery support group at noperiod.info/support and let us know how All In is going for you.
All In is not just about period recovery, it's about getting your life back. See you in 2 weeks.
You were lost in fat loss till you got lost again. You were lost in fat loss. Now find yourself and then take all that you've learned about love and loss, pleasure and pain, and never get lost again.